How's it going, everybody? It's the Kagelo Fox here from my channel where I talk about anime, video games, cartoons, most notably Sonic and Ninja Turtles. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about Cyclops and how I feel about him being inside Avengers Doomsday and the teaser and stuff, which is definitely blowing up online. I know I kind of covered it on Jay Leno's stream along with fellow YouTuber SSJ Namikaze, but I kind of wanted to go a little bit more into detail here about my thoughts. I've been seeing other people give their opinions about it and stuff like that ever since. So, I decided to, definitely just talk about that more about that here and see where the direction of where I think this might be going. So let's get right into it. So it's definitely great to see this look for Cyclops, just as much as it is to see Wolverine in his yellow-blue spandex and Professor X in the yellow hover chair that he had from the '90s cartoon, which that's something that I never really thought I would kind of wanted to see, but I'm like, you know what, it's nice to see it anyways. A little fan service, but it's all right. But this can definitely easily be like some kind of bait and switch because the MCU has done a lot of that with the X-Men, like missing the opportunity to make Evan Peters Quicksilver again, which but they trolled us with the whole Ralph Boner thing inside WandaVision, which that was a huge letdown because kind of for years I've been actually kind of wanting Quicksilver to come back into the MCU ever since they killed him off. I was always like, well, Scarlet Witch does have the power to bring the dead back to life, so she could always... It never happened. They never brought back Quicksilver, none of that stuff. So that kind of sucks. Okay, and then of course the whole killing off Patrick Stewart's Professor X inside as well inside Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, making Kamala Khan a mutant and stuff, which they try to do that in the comics where now she's a mutant and stuff, and she's also the first mutant inside the MCU. Let's not also forget the ruination of Namor inside Black Panther 2. Where Namor, who is actually supposed to be the first mutant of Marvel Comics and stuff, like at least first appearance and stuff, because the wings on Namor's feet, even though Namor is not exactly an X-Men character, the wings on his feet is actually a part of his mutant ability and stuff. It's from his dad's side of the family, his human half, where he got his mutant powers and stuff like that from him. Or that X gene and stuff, whereas he gets the Atlantean side from his mom's side, But they kind of ruined Namor's character for a lot of people, and etc. So I don't really think that the MCU would do the characters any justice compared to like Fox, which actually does follow the comics a lot more better in my honest opinion. Yeah, Fox definitely dropped the ball with Cyclops, where he was decent in the first movie, even taking down like Sabretooth and Magneto with his optic blast towards the end of the movie. Then the second movie, he kind of, he had like one good fight scene in the beginning where he took on those security guards and, he put up a good fight sort of against Lady Deathstrike, but since he wasn't aware of her strength or whatever, she kind of knocked him out in one hit and stuff like that, and then he's kind of captured throughout most of the movie, so he's pretty much shelved, so that was kind of a waste. Then in the third movie, he's kind of just killed right off the bat, but right before he unleashes Jean as the Phoenix and stuff, who kind of just killed a lot of people in her way. So that's kind of like equivalent of like, a boy just letting out his rabid dog, not only getting rabies from his dog, but also sicking his rabid dog on plenty of other people and stuff. That's kind of how it felt like with Cyclops. And I don't really see a lot of people really talk about him inside X-Men Origins and stuff like that, but he also was captured again in that one too, and he had like kind of a moment where he does kind of save his fellow escapees and stuff, where he like uses optic blast to take out those gunmen. So that was a pretty cool scene at least. And then Deadpool, which I know a lot of people were not fans of that version of Deadpool, definitely, but the optic blast thing was pretty cool though, that Deadpool was using. I'm not gonna lie to you on that one. Then of course finally comes he finally does come back to life inside Days of the Future Past and stuff, and then his son Cable is he stars inside Deadpool 2. X-Men Apocalypse wasn't really a good movie, but I think they at least tried to do something there with Cyclops in that movie and stuff by trying to give him some focus and having Havoc die and stuff, his brother, to try and give him some motivation to become like a better leader and all that stuff. I think that's the only takeaway from it. Not to mention, I think that's actually where they actually did try to go for the blue and stuff and the more comic book accurate outfit, but people still weren't really talking about Cyclops like that from that movie. The only things people really talked about was that one scene Wolverine had when he was killing all those people, and Quicksilver scene where he saved everybody from the X-Mansion. That was really about it. And then Days of the Future, Days of the Future was a pretty short movie and stuff, but like it was pretty much just everyone having a slugfest against like around random like mutants and stuff, and everybody trying to protect Jean or something, And all I remember Cyclops in that movie for was him saving the shuttle along with the other X-Men at the start, and then him saying, if you touch her, I'll fucking kill you. You know, like that kind of thing. So that's really about it for Cyclops and stuff. And by the way, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dark Phoenix, it could have been a better movie, but they had a lot of restrictions and stuff because of Disney, because they had a rights or whatever type of issue or whatever that they couldn't, fully utilize. So it's a whole thing there. So yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there. And a little side note, can we stop acting like the 2000s black leather costumes was all bad? Because they weren't really as bad as people were trying to make it seem like it is. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I definitely do prefer the more classic outfits and stuff, of course. And I think, honestly, of course, like, I'm not saying I'm complaining about the Wolverine outfit or anything, because, I definitely like that from Deadpool 3 and stuff. But what I personally think they should have, but I think they should have definitely introduced it, at least maybe in the 2010s this year, with the Wolverine costume. That's just my honest opinion. But, comic book movies back then, they definitely wanted to be taken a lot more seriously and stuff and not too cartoonish. Like, if you look at Blade and stuff, back in the 70s, Blade used to wear, green, and he had, a little afro and stuff like that. And then when we get to, the late 90s and 2000s, Wesley Snipes and stuff, they're kind of doing their own, he's kind of doing his own thing with the sunglasses and the fade, and the pencil mustache and stuff like that, and the trench coat and the bulletproof vest and all that stuff. That's that was the movie original thing, So, I'm just saying, and it's not like X-Men haven't worn other matching uniforms and stuff like that in the past, because they wore it back in their first appearance and stuff, and they also wore it even after the 90s and stuff like that in the Ultimate Comics or in some of the cartoons. So I just wanted to put that out there.
There have been people interested in doing an X-Men movie for a long time. They never could come up with the right story, the right approach, and having been burnt a number of times in the past by allowing people to do movie versions of our characters that were less than profound, we were very particular.
I know I was part of the initial discussions that we had back in '89 and '90 with James Cameron and Lightstorm when they were going to produce the X-Men and for Carolco. And we were going full steam ahead with that. And we had meetings, Larry Kazanov and Cameron and Stan and I, and we all sat down and we talked about it. And then Cameron got caught up in doing Spider-Man, and Carolco just went up in smoke. The movie's a totally different animal in the comics. I mean, the same way it'd be a totally different animal if they were adapting a book. You have a whole different set of opportunities, and you have to redefine it in terms that make sense for the movie. Brightly colored spandex skin-tight costumes in a comic look great because they're pictures. You put them on real people and it's like, ugh.
These kind of pictures need the kind of technology that is available today.
Anyways, I used to think that Cyclops was one of the coolest X-Men growing up until they destroyed his character inside Avengers vs. X-Men. And they probably did that too because, they wanted to kind of, since Marvel doesn't have full rights to the X-Men and stuff as far as, the filming rights, they probably wanted to push the Avengers a little bit more, so they kind of demonized the X-Men and, kind of kicked them to the curb or neglected them. That's kind of why the X-Men were appearing less and less throughout the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Once we got to Marvel vs. Capcom 3, a lot of the characters like Cyclops himself, Gambit, Rogue, a lot of those characters got cut. It was just Wolverine, Storm, Keen, Deadpool, Sentinel, and Magneto. That was really about it. Even though they started Marvel vs. Capcom, and then, all of them are completely cut inside Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which is the worst Marvel vs. Capcom game. So, yeah. But anyways, going back to the comics though. So yeah, or this whole thing. So yeah, that's probably why. And then they kind of made Cyclops into a mutant terrorist or something. And before that, they kind of ruined his relationship in the 2000s with Jean Grey, with his little affair that he was having with Emma Frost, his little psychic affair, as we all know. So really, X-Men 97 is kind of his saving grace in the recent years, where he was kind of the talk of the town and stuff. And then we kind of got him inside Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, where he's actually one of my mains. I know you guys have seen me play Marvel vs. Capcom, and you know I've chosen Cyclops a bunch of times and stuff because I like using his abilities, and he's kind of an easy to use character. He's kind of like his playstyle is a lot like Ryu's, where he can do the spin kick, the dragon punch, or little uppercut and stuff like that. You know, he's got the little optic blast, so like projectile energy beams and stuff like that, just like Ryu's Hadouken. And then his super is like full on just optic blasts and stuff like that, just like Ryu's Hadouken and everything. Not to mention he was supposed to be Ryu's rival inside Marvel vs. Capcom, but then when we got to 3, they replaced him with Wolverine. Isn't that crazy, huh? So anyways, so hopefully Cyclops definitely does get some love, because not only does he like really need it in just the movies, but practically everything else at this point. I know a lot of people are kind of like iffy on Cyclops because they're, mostly their basis is really the movies and some of the cartoons and stuff. And honestly, I think the best portrayals of Cyclops is really, at least as far as the cartoons goes, is X-Men the Animated Series, and especially X-Men Evolution and stuff, The movies, Cyclops definitely got a raw deal and stuff like that, mainly in favor of Wolverine, which, don't get me wrong, Wolverine's a really great character and stuff, but they kind of overpushed him a little bit, and then, got the cartoon Wolverine and the X-Men, which, Wolverine and the X-Men is a really great cartoon, but to be honest, like, it just feels like they're kind of giving a lot of what Cyclops has to Wolverine, like the relationship with Jean Grey, the leadership role, everything, But anyways, let me just get back on topic. So, while Deadpool 3 was a good movie, it was kind of built off the backs and the labor of the Fox movies, not the MCU.
6 years ago, Scott Nimmerfro, who was a development person at our company, brought the idea of making X-Men into a movie to me. And I confess I knew of it, certainly, but I hadn't read it, any of the issues. So he gave me a couple issues, and he gave me a background of all the characters. And the first character I read about was Logan, Wolverine. And he was a tragic hero. And I got really caught up in his whole history. I felt he was psychologically complex. And I started reading the other characters, and I called up Scott and I said, absolutely, we're making this movie.
They just kind of provided the budget and provided the mandates on what they could and couldn't do, which it kind of was revealed recently that they had overspent on the movie, as a matter of fact. And granted, the MCU has had some of decent movies in recent years, or in some of the, or has at least been better than what I expected. Like, Thunderbolts, I was like, oh, that movie wasn't half as bad as I thought it would be, or or Captain America 4 or whatever. Again, not half bad as I thought it would be, or Fantastic Four. It was definitely succeeded my expectations. But that doesn't mean that Marvel is back yet. I mean, that's still not really good enough to make a comeback. That's just like, oh, well, that was just a bland kind of 7 out of 10 average kind of movie, almost like the early 2000s G.I. Joe movies. That's what I would kind of compare those last couple of movies to, if anything. But that's what I personally think. But tell me down below what you guys think. Do you guys think that Avengers Doomsday is actually going to portray the X-Men pretty well? Personally, myself, I don't think they'll really stick the landing or do a better job than Fox. That's just my personal opinion, because the MCU can sometimes be petty, especially the properties that they don't really have the rights to, like the Universal stuff, when they've been self-sabotaging Hulk a little bit, some of the Hulk characters, or the Fox stuff or whatever. And then recently they just announced that they canceled the Blade movie. So a lot of this is kind of a little bit sus, Alright, but anyways, that's it for today. Tell me down below what you guys think. This is Joe Little Fox, and I'm out. Or Kage Little Fox. I'm out. Peace, and until we meet again.